You guys are all familiar with the Ukraine conflict, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, wait. Before I do that, ask her if a woman goes to war, who's the primary victim of war? If we switched it,
I already answered this question.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, with you. You said the same thing. You said if your husband got his leg blown off and you had to go and you got, whatever the war, and you had to fight, would he be the victim too? I already stated that I think both are the victims. So,
Okay.
yes.
So there's a very recent conflict, the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So this one's an interesting one because it's much more recent. We're all familiar with it, I'm assuming. So Ukraine is kind of the perfect microcosm of the inconsistency inherent in feminism. Women are the equals of men until the bombs start to drop. Now, I'll ask you once more for everybody who said it's both. In the Ukraine conflict, who's the primary victim of war, men or women, starting with you?
I am not familiar enough on this situation or educated enough on this situation to speak on it. Like, just plain and simple.
Well, but you were able to, for the previous question, you were
I don't
able
know
to
what's
say
going.
both.
I don't know what's going on.
Well, you are familiar that there is a war in Ukraine, correct?
Okay. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you asking specific to that? Are you asking specific to that war?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going on.
Okay. What about
in that war? If I'm going to be honest.
You said both. Does your answer change at all when it comes to Ukraine?
Who's the primary victim in war with the Ukraine?
Of the Ukraine war, men or women?
Aren't women fighing in that war? Aren't the citizens?
There are some women.
I guess whoever.
Let's assume that 5% of the military is female. Go ahead and answer the question.
But aren't the citizens fighting the war as well, not just the military?
What?
Aren't the citizens of Ukraine fighting the war, not just the military?
Well,
so then it would be both, because they're both fighting.
Somebody.
I think both, regardless of if the woman is fighting or not. So.
No, civilians aren't really fighting in the war. No, there's some incidences of that, but it's primarily the two military forces, and civilians are doing what they usually do in war and supporting the military operations via support roles.
Then I guess the primary victim would be whoever's the bigger statistic. Which I don't know.
That's what he was proving. That's what he's trying to make his whole point this whole time.
It's overwhelmingly men who are dying in the war, for sure. Mm-hmm. But that's every war. It's overwhelmingly men who are dying in every war. Doesn't matter if it's that conflict
starting all
or a
these
different
wars?
conflict.
Probably men.
Not the men that are fighting in it.
Yeah, definitely not. War is
those are the men we're talking
rich man's
about.
game.
Well, war affects everybody. It's gonna hurt families. It's gonna hurt children and everyone. So I feel like you can't even compare two different types of pain, because if someone's staying at home, they're still going to be hurt and affected by the people that are fighting in the war. Like if my son gets drafted, I'm going to feel the pain of that just as much as he might be feeling the physical pain. So I feel like, again, it's both, because you can't really compare physical and mental pain.
But that really wasn't the question.
What's
the question was, who is the primary?
All
it's like mental gymnastics.
You guys are not
understanding
that.
We're saying both.
You guys just aren't liking the answer.
Exactly.
Well, you guys are simply just not liking the answer. You guys
because we're giving why we feel like it's both, and we're saying it's not just a physical aspect. It's also an emotional aspect and not just that, but it's a lot of other things that. Women have to pick the pieces up on in war, and so that makes them less of a victim because they didn't die in it. I agree with that. That's just my opinion.
So I'll just kind of where I'm going here with the Ukraine conflict. I don't know. Did you weigh in on this? Did you give a?
I guess both.
Still both? Okay.
I'm gonna say both.
So I'll just give you guys an additional information and see if it changes your mind at all. So, at the breakout of the war, there was a decree by the Ukrainian government that required all military-age men, in fact, even very old men, so all men between the ages of 18, I believe, to either 60 or 65, had to remain in the country. They could not flee, they had to stay, whereas women and children could leave. And in fact, a great many women, millions of women, fled Ukraine. They were not compelled to join the military or anything like that in the same way that men were. Knowing this additional information, this inequality, that the men had to stay, I think if they got caught, they could face punishment, they could go to jail, fines, etc. Knowing just this additional piece of information, does that change your answer at all?
Sure, a little bit.
Into the mic, please.
I said sure a little bit. I think, I guess like that would make them more of a victim, but that makes them a victim of their own country and, politics and physical.
A victim of their own country, but their
because
country's
your
at
country,
war.
of course, which it's
And if the wartime policy is to allow every single woman in the
but
country,
you can't leave. You're being. I mean, then that's America does it too. So there's a draft, and you have to go if they say you got to go. I mean, that sucks. Like that is like that.
Does it change your answer at all, knowing this extra piece of information?
I mean, I kind of have the same feeling. Like men are more of the victim of physical pain because, like, even if it's vice versa, like if the men were staying home.
Do you think war is strictly physical injury?
Oh no.
Have you heard about this?
No, it's strain.
Have you heard
It's
about
PTSD.
shell shock?
Yeah.
It's PTSD. I understand
Have you heard
that.
of shell shock?
Yes, I understand that.
Okay. So why do you keep going to this? Well, in the physical realm, men suffer more.
Because if you go onto a war field versus stay at home, like how are you? Like, are you more likely to get like bombed? Yeah. Like physical pain. Like if you walk out into a minefield versus staying at home. Like
I guess where I'm confused here is you're saying, well, men on the physical realm they have it worse, but in the psychological, mental
oh no,
realm,
that's terrible. No one can like.
But so I don't really understand, because you say both. So if you say both, wouldn't you follow your argument up from, well, men on this hand have it worse, but women on this hand have it worse. But I failed to see on which hand
it's just,
women have it worse when it comes to war.
I wouldn't say worse. It's just bad. War is bad. There's no good war. There's
Let
no
me
one
ask you a
in
question.
the right.
If somebody stole $5 from you versus somebody stole your entire life savings, I don't know how much your life, maybe if it's $5, it doesn't matter, but which one would be worse?
Definitely life savings.
Okay. Because of the magnitude in which someone has deprived you of your belongings, in this case, your money.
Yeah, are you comparing that to the men in war? Is that the statistic?
Well, if a woman trips and falls and get a boo-boo,
Well, I mean, like
versus a man gets a shell impaled through his body.
Yeah, that blows.
One's worse than the other.
But like his kids at home, like it's just as bad. Like his kid. I mean, it's not. No, it's not just as bad. I take it back. But the kids at home are still gonna like feel shit. The mom's gonna feel shit. So
yes, I don't disagree with you.
So I guess arguably men would have it statistically worse. But okay, now I'm gonna change my answer because men statistically would have it worse. But
okay.
I guess my point is that the people at home are still gonna feel that too.
And then what about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it sounds like you're coming from a physical standpoint, so physically.
No, I'm speaking in totality.
Okay, yeah. I mean, arguably because they experience both mental pain and physical pain, I would say statistically, yeah, but I'm not taking away from those who are suffering back at home as well.
Yeah,
No, everyone's a
neither
victim
am I.
of
Sucks
war.
for everyone.
Yeah.
Nobody
Neither-
ever
that's
denied
not the
that
argument.
that the women aren't victims of war.
Women
of course
absolutely
they are.
suffer.
Primary
But I
victim.
think
Women
it's both.
absolutely suffer, but thank you, Abigail. The original question was, who is the primary?
I still
That means there
think-
can be a secondary.
I still think it's situational.
I think it could be situational
What do you
if,
mean?
like, if the man got killed and then the son, like, let's say
Yeah.
a woman had a son and then he, like, went in a spiral and died too. I think that the mother
So
would be the
wouldn't
primary.
men still, if she has a son, wouldn't men still be the primary victim? Because that's a male.
Okay, what
That's
if
a
it's
double,
daughter, though?
yeah.
What if it's
What
a
if
daughter?
yeah,
What
what
if
if
it-
it's a
I
daughter?
mean, she does
Oh.
the same thing. She spirals out. My dad died in war. I hate life now.
Your
Yeah.
That's
tough
my
one.
dad. I love my dad.
But wouldn't she then be
But
a
you just don't feel as
secondary?
sympathetic
Wouldn't she be a
the woman.
secondary victim?
Secondary.
Because her father was the primary
victim, yeah.
Also, I would like to say, so yes, you have a whole family that's losing their father as he goes off to war, but you have the father that's losing his whole family as he goes off to war.
Yeah,
They're
not
at
everyone.
home. He's at war. They have each other.
Yeah.
He has himself.
That's exactly why we're saying both.
Oh,
Anyways,
No.
there's one. Nick, can
But
you pull
I'm
up that
also-
photo of Ukraine? Then we'll move it on.
When you
With
said when you said the whole statement about $5 versus life savings, were you comparing life savings to death? Is that what it was?
I wasn't.
Were you trying to- 'cause
It
you
was
were
more
saying-
of an analogy, I
Or
guess.
yeah,
but
analogy.
I wasn't comparing obviously death is worse than losing your life
Okay,
savings.
obviously. But what I'm asking is, when you did that analogy, is it worse to lose $5 or is it worse to lose your life savings?
10,000, yeah.
Whatever. Life savings is what you were saying. Were you
Sure.
saying were you trying to kind of compare losing, obviously not compare, but was your analogy with life savings, you know,
Well, when
Is-
you
I
were
don't
you trying to
understand-
say-
I don't understand your question. I'm sorry.
when you brought up that analogy, what was your point? What were you trying to prove?
I was trying to, I guess, differentiate by degrees of harm, degrees of hurt. So, for example, if somebody stole $5 from me, I'd be upset for like 30 seconds.
Okay.
If I went and saw my bank, looked at my bank statements and saw that all my money had been drained, the degree of like anxiety response I would have, the degree of, and assuming it's like unretrievable, like
Yeah.
it's gone, I've lost my money, I am like distraught. There's legitimate concerns over,
So
can I afford
life-
rent? Can I
yeah,
do like that?
of course.
So there's bigger ramifications.
So
there.
life savings drained, what was the comparison to the, men in
I
war?
just explained it to you.
No, I'm asking what was the comparison?
I don't
the
understand
men in
your
the war
question.
were the
he's-
life savings
Well,
because the men in the
he's
war are
giving
getting more
a
deprived
he's giving a
from them.
scalability, right? So like an order of operations to scalability. If I steal a penny from you, it's going to affect you less than if I steal $5 from you. It's going to affect you less than if I steal 100. It's going to affect you less than if I steal 1,000, et cetera, right? So on a scale of how much you've been victimized, you would say if somebody stole $5 from you, it would victimize you less than if they stole your entire life savings. So he's saying the ultimate thing here, though, is your life. At the end of the day, that is
So your
the
life. So
ultimate
meaning that the
Yeah.
man,
Yeah,
the
that's the
hypothetical
ultimate
man in
value
war
that
has
you
passed
have,
away.
yeah.
Meaning the hypothetical man in war has passed away. Your life. Meaning the hypothetical
life,
man
yeah.
in war has passed away. Right.
Yeah.
So in that situation, I think the other person is a bigger victim because the man has
Why?
passed away. He's no longer experiencing mental trauma. The man has passed away. He experienced death, which obviously is horrible. But now the people at home, the woman,
Yeah, they have to carry
They
that.
are carrying
They have
on.
to carry on with that.
So do
and
you
they,
think
and they have
that,
to go
okay,
teach
so
their,
let's,
their
let's
children
kind of-
and their
let's
so
kind of
that's why I'm
examine
saying
that. So
this
you
question is situational because
So then, by this logic, then you think it's better to be dead than be alive with trauma?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
honestly,
Yeah.
yeah.
And are
really just
all
depends.
of you traumatized?
Are all of us traumatized?
Like in general?
So, haven't you experienced trauma? Isn't psychological
every
trauma
person
pretty much
has,
all of it?
yeah.
And aren't you living with trauma? Then why aren't you unaliving?
Because maybe it's not that deep.
It's situational. Like I don't know why you can't understand that it's
Yeah,
situational.
I agree. It's situational. But what I'm saying to you is that it's beyond obvious to me that people would much rather live with trauma than be dead. That seems obvious.
I mean,
to
a lot
me.
of people
depends
kill
on the
themselves.
trauma.
No,
It's
it's not because a lot of people
Wouldn't
kill
you say-
themselves
wouldn't
every
you say
year.
it's
So
beyond
A lot of
obvious
people-
especially
considering how many
Americans,
pass
people
away.
choose to live with trauma rather than unaliving?
Actually, a lot of people pass away from self-inflicted injuries because
Very
of the
few.
trauma they've been
a
through.
lot of people
lot.
kill themselves,
No, not
especially
a
in
lot.
America.
A lot of
lot
people
more-
die to
a whole
suicide.
lot more people live with trauma than unalive themselves
But a
from trauma.
lot still unalive
Wait.
themselves
But can
because
you,
of that.
like, what statistic, like, can you pull that out of and say, like, yeah, these people live with trauma? Like, you're just saying.
So
stuff.
therefore,
Like,
can you just
anybody could
like say that
I'm
it's
just saying,
situational?
okay, I'm just
like
saying,
I don't know
so
why.
let's just see
Well,
if
'cause
we
you
can
guys are being
agree
very
if it's obvious or
statistical,
not.
so-
You guys
How
are
many
looking at this
women
black
as a
and white.
percentage, as a percentage, do you think live with significant trauma? Over 20%?
Yes.
If it's over, do you think that women are unaliving themselves at a rate of 20%?
I mean, I don't know the percentage,
know.
but I know that
You don't
every
know
year
if
it goes
women
up.
are unaliving
People want to
themselves
kill
at a rate
themselves
of
every year. It goes
20%?
up,
No, they're not.
which means people are dealing with a lot of trauma and they don't want to live with
If
it.
you lost 20% of a population in a war, it would be the biggest bloodbath known to man. 20% is astronomical. We're talking about astronomical numbers. There's no way, it should be completely obvious to you that there's no fucking way 20% of women unalive themselves due to trauma. That's just insane.
I didn't say that.
There's no way you
You're
could
the
ever
one who
believe
no
said
one
that.
said that.
You're the one who
Like,
brought
look
up
it up.
20%.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't know.
I-
what
no,
percentage.
no,
I know that.
We didn't know
Do you
what
think
you
it's-
meant by the whole
Suicide is very
20%.
high in America, and I know every year.
Bro, you're not
it
listening to
climbs.
the logic, right? You talk more than you listen, and yet I've been sitting here listening, not talking. So the thing is what I asked specifically was this question. Do you think that more women unalive themselves due to trauma or live with the trauma? And she's like, well, I don't know. Okay, well, if that's the case, do you think that at least more than 20% of women experience significant trauma? Yes. Are they unaliving themselves? No. No, they're not.
Well,
They're
however,
not.
But,
Not
you're
those
not.
rates.
No,
They're
you're
not
not.
even
No,
close.
because I don't feel like what you're saying is like real statistics. You're just throwing numbers out and saying, is that 20%
just
of women who
testing the
experience
logic.
20% of women who experience high trauma, are they unaliving themselves? A lot of them might be. Who, like, can you tell me?
How many
like,
do you
can you
think
tell me?
are?
Because I can't tell you. Huh?
Well, how many do you think are? So
I don't
out of,
know.
let's say you have, let's just do
Somebody
it easy.
make-
Let's just do it easy. If you have 30 women who are experiencing severe trauma, do you think 15 of them are going to unalive
I
themselves?
think, no, not 15, but 3.
Do you think
probably
10?
3 out of 30. Probably.
Maybe
That's
like
10%.
Three out of 30?
3.
whatever
That's a
you
lot.
look up is going to be like too big of a statistic anyway. Like I don't think it matters if it's like 5% or 20%. It's a lot. It's bad. Like it's too many. One is too many. An attempt is too many. So no matter, it doesn't even matter that it's like 20%. It's too much. Like I don't even
Yeah,
know.
but
Like, look
the
it
point
up.
of the question is to make the determination as to whether people would rather, if it's obvious that people would rather live with trauma rather than not. It seems that that would be self-obvious to everybody in existence, considering that most people, the overwhelming majority, the vast majority of all of humanity, does not unalive themselves, even though many of them experience massive trauma. They're not unaliving themselves.
But lots of
So
them
I
are
don't-
still suffering horribly.
But do the
Yeah,
percentage on
they
that.
could be
People who are-
suffering, but if they're making the choice not to
suffering
unalive
massively, how
themselves,
many
then it
what's
seems
the
that they
percentage of
consider
them
that to be
killing
the
themselves?
superior position,
My bad.
right? It seems that they prefer to be alive. That seems
He's
to be the
arguing
superior
your
position.
guys' statement that it's better to live with trauma than die. Or that it's worse to
I
live
think-
with trauma than die.
I think
Yeah.
it's
I
situational.
think every
That's
person
a
has
statement
trauma.
that you guys made.
I don't think every person has serious trauma. Now, what one person might consider serious,
I
is
think just because
very
somebody
opinion
chooses
We're
to stay
subjective,
alive
very
throughout their
subjective.
trauma doesn't mean
But
that
to people
they
who
are
are
happy about
experiencing
that.
mass trauma, like very high levels of stress and trauma, and are very not well in their head, like mentally disturbed. How many of these people are unaliving themselves? Probably a decent percentage of them.
yes, but
Now,
it
I'm
is-
not saying 50%, maybe 3, 4, 5 to 10% might be, and that's still.
Okay,
it's-
you know what? Let me just ask this in the most
So
basic
sure,
way
yeah.
possible.
Then
I've been
no.
thinking about
Then
how I
your
can
point
ask
is,
this
yeah,
in a
you're
way that
correct.
you guys
Would you rather
just
live with trauma? Yeah, because
intuitively. Hang on, let me just ask this in a way all of you would just intuitively kind of understand. Do you think if you went to most people, men and women, and you asked them this question, if you push button A, you're going to have experience serious trauma, and if you push button B, you're going to die. Which button do you think they would push?
Starting with you, go ahead.
I feel like it depends on the person. As to
Ah,
do you
yes,
want to
always-
get shot or do you want to get raped? That's the question.
That's not the question.
Like,
That's not
would
what I
you
said.
Yeah, no, it actually
There's
is the
all
Would
sorts
you
of
rather
different
die
trauma.
or would you
I'm just
rather be
saying,
raped?
it
Like,
it
that's the
actually is the
question.
question.
It depends on the type of
It
trauma.
literally
my
is the
question.
question.
It's
That's
situational.
not
It's, again,
my question.
But
My
that's
question
trauma,
was,
crazy trauma
Well,
versus
button A.
dying. What would
Button
you
A.
rather choose? Pick
That's
one.
not my question. Stop. Here's the question again. Don't rephrase the question.
No, it's like comparing apples to
Okay?
oranges.
The question is, button A, you experience significant trauma. Button B, you die on the spot.
But he
A lightning bolt shoots out of the sky and you die. Those are your two options. Do you think most people would choose button A or button B?
I think people would choose the trauma, but I think would they regret that? They might. I think a high percentage might.
Why do you think they would choose the trauma?
Because when after you have dealt with the trauma, now I'm living with this crazy wild shit when I could have just died. You might at that point
No. My
decide
question
it was.
why do you think they
I
would
should have
choose
chose to just die.
the trauma?
'cause Screw
Why do you
living
think
with
they
this
would
trauma.
choose the trauma?
Huh? Because they
Why
don't
do you
know.
think
I
they
mean,
would choose it?
unless they know what the trauma is. Like if the like I said, if it's like, okay, what's the choice? Like I die or I get raped. Like
It's situational.
$200.
Because the trauma could.
Why does it always seem to me they put the dumbest of girls at the end of the table?
So the trauma could be you know,
Thank you,
okay,
Puppet.
you,
All right, thank you,
you've
Hunter.
dealt with, I don't know, like a little bit of whatever the fuck, like
Yes, I'm
being made
dumb.
fun of in 2nd grade, right? Like you'd probably prefer to
I'm
live.
more
Shit's
educated
rough.
than most of y'all.
He said seriously.
Watch
If
it.
the
Grade was
trauma,
rough.
if the trauma is emotional trauma, I'd press the trauma button. If it's medical trauma, I'm pressing the death button.
You raising your hand over here. You haven't spoken much.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, it depends, because, I mean, everyone, everyone's trauma is valid, but, like, I mean, if I were to have these 2 buttons in front of my face, I don't know, I mean, I don't know what would happen after death, but I would
What
choose
medical
trauma. I
do
would
you
choose trauma.
experience if your husband dies at war?
What medical MS?
What medical trauma are you experiencing? What are you talking about? It would all be psychological.
Oh, all
right?
psychological. Okay, yeah, psychological.
Yeah, it would all be
okay,
psychological. So
Okay,
the thing is
yeah.
that when we're talking about trauma here in this context, talking
Okay.
about severe psychological trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather push? Do you think most people would choose button A or button B? Do you think intuitively most people would push button A or button B? B is death. A is psychological trauma.
A.
A.
They would definitely choose A.
Nope,
But
not
does
Then that
mean they'd
would
be
should
happy
give
with
you
that?
some self-apparent evidence that the death portion for most people is the non-preferable option. That's just basic logical demonstration. If intuitively you think almost
have a
everybody
question.
would
Can I ask you a
choose
question?
the button to not die, then it seems self-obvious that people would rather be traumatized than dead. It seems obvious, right?
So if you were like a little kid, right, like back in like Nazi Germany or Jewish, and you had the option before Hitler came in, you had the option to
What is
either.
Godwin's law? Okay, let's use any analogy
No.
besides,
So you could go through all
Nazis.
this trauma, right? You could go get sent to an extermination camp, be severely
No, we're not going to get into
abused.
that. Use
Yeah,
any
no.
analogy but
Listen,
that.
listen.
Use
Stop.
any analogy
Use a
but that
different
one.
analogy.
I have an analogy. You get in a
It's
car
because
accident.
it's because it's listen.
No,
it's not
because
because
I'm gonna ask, would you
I don't
rather
mind
die?
the analogy.
Stop.
Listen,
Or gone
I
through
don't mind the
emotional trauma?
analogy. The terms of service
If
for
you knew what
the
it was.
platform we're on, they mind the analogy.
Had you
So
guys been
just
on
use
time
any other
today,
analogy.
had you guys been on time today, we would have been able to have gone through the entire pre-show and have given you the instructions about what to avoid. Go ahead.
Here's an analogy. Let's say you leave here tonight and you get in a terrible car accident and you wake up in the hospital and you've broken legs, you have severe damage, medical to your body and it's psychological. Are you going to say, I wish I would have died?
I
Because
mean,
that's-
I feel like that's not.
You would be grateful
That's
to
not
be
extra.
alive.
That's
Yes, it-
traumatic,
I would
but
wanna
it's
live
not
like
like to the extreme of what a trauma somebody could deal with in trauma. So, like going and getting in a car accident is trauma, yes, but that
Yeah,
doesn't
you lost a
mean.
loved
Hold
one
on.
in war. That's your trauma.
Both your legs are amputated from this accident. But you're still grateful to be alive.
Oh,
It's
here.
like-
So here, let's just make it even simpler. Button A is you experience all of the trauma a person would experience losing a loved one in war, or button B, you die instantly. Which button do you think most people would push? Button A or button B?
Depends on the person. It's situational.
All right.
Most people. I'm just asking for most people. Which button do you think most people would push?
I just don't think
Doc
that's
Venabilly donated
something you can
$200.
ask.
Rate of major depression, maker
That's
of
it.
emotional trauma, in US Fem is 26% per 100K. Rate of self-delete is 5% per 100K for Fem.
Yeah.
Most people rather live with severe adversity than death. End idiocy now.
Yeah, I'm not
Andrew,
disagreeing.
may I
Well
just
put.
may I ask you why?
Yeah, go ahead.
Bro, it's
May I
obviously
ask you
fake.
why?
Hold on.
Final Wave Feminism donated $200. 10 plus years interviewing thousands of women. To reach the same conclusion as the most intelligent, respected theologians, philosophers, etc., women are children. They require top-down guidance.
Okay. May I ask a question?
Thank you, Final Wave Feminism.
Yeah, I'd like to hear your question.
Why is it so black and white to you? Why can't you understand that there's layers to things and that people are different and it can't just be one or the other? Like every
agree.
single person is different. One person may be okay with living with.
I agree.
Okay, so then why are you trying to argue that with us?
Because
we're all saying both.
So I'm going to explain. So I can grant this to you and say every single human being is different with different preferences. Everything from whether or not they like pineapple on pizza or pepperoni, right? All the way down to the little micro nuances. However, there seems to be shared intuitions that most people have that you would agree that we have, right? So here's a good example of a shared intuition. taking people's shit that they don't want you to take, they don't like that. That seems to be a shared intuition all over the world. For instance, is there anybody at this table who prefers that people take their stuff away from them? Anybody? Show of hands. A single person who prefers? No, not a single one. Seems like that's a shared intuition, even though all of you have totally different preferences about all sorts of things. So if there's that shared intuition, why shouldn't I think that there could be other shared intuitions like trauma, people wanting to live with trauma rather than death, which could be self-obvious just based on the fact that you think most people would push button A or button B. That seems like now we're getting into, well, we share some sort of intuition here, right?
I hear what you're saying. I really do. But I just...
No, well, I'm glad that you hear it. I'm actually looking for a counter-argument.
If you let me speak.
Go ahead.
If you let me speak, I could give you that. I hear
Go
what
ahead.
you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Yes, there's shared intuitions. Obviously, people don't want their shit taken, right? But not everybody is the same.
Yeah,
So,
but we've already established that.
So then what are you trying to say?
Dude, can we establish right now that nobody in the room with
Charlie
you is the same
Tanner
as you?
donated
But that's so much
$200.
different than somebody
Ryan,
saying that
read
they'd
the book I
rather
put in the
live
chat.
with trauma.
Today's Father's Day. My sister has cancer. I had
Sorry
brain
to hear that, man.
surgery. My brother is disabled. My mother is sick. I work 3 jobs. All of you, please carry your cross.
Amen.
Thank you for the 200.
Yeah,
But
thank
yeah,
you, Charlie.
so back to
Thank
this
you, Charlie.
just real quick. You agree that everybody in this room is totally different from each other, right down to their preferences. Even the way that you just took a drink of that drink that you have, water, whatever it is going to be different than how the gal next to you drinks that cup of water.
Yeah.
We're going to agree it's totally layered and nuanced all the way down. But that doesn't mean that we don't share some intuitions which make us human beings. And a seeming intuition I can point to right now
Yeah.
is you don't want your stuff taken from you. That is
So
yours.
then, if you
Everyone in that room agree. Now,
Yeah.
hang on. Wouldn't you agree that almost nobody in the whole world wants you to take their stuff away from them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then that's a shared intuition.
It is
so
a
what's
shared
wrong with this
intuition.
analogy of a shared intuition that people would rather be alive with trauma than dead? That seems like a shared intuition.
Well, you're saying it seems like, and you're asking for facts from us, but you're not giving us
I'm just
facts
asking
either.
you what it seems like. I'm not even asking you for a fact. I'm just asking you, what does your intuition say most people would do in this situation? Push button A
Personally,
or button B?
I think it depends. I think it's situational, and I think it depends on the person.
Okay, but if what would you say to this then? Button A, your shit is taken away from you. Button B, your stuff is not taken away from you.
I would
Which
prefer
button
my
would they
shit to
push?
not be taken away from me.
You're right. So intuitively, everything which you have observed around you your entire life informs you intuitively that that's what they would push. But you didn't need any data. You needed no data. You needed no
You asked
anything
me,
to come.
that
Hang
was-
on, stop. I'm almost done. I'm going to
That
let you
was my
counter. I
opinion.
promise I'm going to let you counter. Hang on. You didn't need a single shred of data to come to that intuitively. You didn't need it. Right?
That I said I would prefer my shit not to be taken?
No. That you think that you would prefer. You think everybody would push the button for the most part that they didn't want their stuff taken, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think most people don't want their shit taken.
Right. So you can arrive to these intuitive conclusions absent any data at all, just based on observation.
Yeah. But my
Yeah, so
intuitive
that would be an
conclusion.
obvious
Hey, when he's
observation.
talking and you talk, he can't hear you.
But my intuitive conclusion about your question whether people would rather live with trauma or, die, I'm saying I don't know. On that one, I'm saying I don't know. You asked me my intuitive conclusion about if I'd want my shit taken or not. I'm saying personally I'd rather not
Sure.
have my shit taken.
Wait, can you just
Yeah.
drive
So
straight
I
to the
can
mic?
I can agree with you that you may not know the answer precisely. You might say, well, I'm not sure this or that. But then when I kind of counter with, then why aren't people who experience severe trauma unaliving themselves at this kind of massive rate? You would think that if the preference was the other direction, that they would be doing that, and they're not. So it seems intuitive, right?
I get what you're saying, but I'm also not saying that the suffering is equal
All right.
to the
I'm
counter
not saying
argument.
it is either.
That's my point. I feel like for certain people the suffering is equal to death. And so that's why I'm
And
saying it's situational.
I agree. For certain people,
It
I'm
depends
sure it is.
on the person.
And for
okay,
certain people, I'm
great.
sure that's true.
Exactly. So it's just it's
Yeah,
not
but that
black
has
and
nothing
white.
to do with the argument, though.
It's not black and white. You're asking me about my shit being taken or it not being taken. I'm saying I'd rather not have my shit taken. I feel like most people would rather not
No,
have
you're
their-
not. You're saying that you think most
I
people
just said
would
that.
prefer not to have
I
their
literally
stuff
just
taken,
said
right?
that. I think most people would rather
Yeah.
not have their shit taken. But for this other
Yeah.
argument, I'm saying I don't know.
All right, you guys are kind
right.
of going in circles.
Okay, so I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I got this right. You cannot come to an intuitive conclusion that you think most people would prefer death over trauma. I just want to make
think
sure we got that on record.
It
You're not
depends. It depends on the person.
sure. I said most people.
It depends on the person.
Okay, so you're not sure.
I'm
So
not
again,
gonna
then-
give you
so
the
then if
answer
that's
that
the
you
case,
want. It
then you're
depends on
not
the
sure
person.
that most people wouldn't choose death.
It depends on the person.
And
Yeah, I know,
she's
but
not gonna.
okay, but
I'm
it
not
can't.
gonna give you the answer
It
that
can't-
you
it
want,
can't.
Andrew.
Because it's most, right?
I'm really not.
If you're not
it
sure, then
depends.
what you're saying,
Perfectly
if you
okay.
answer-
Andrew, I'm
listen,
not.
you have to
Listen to me. I'm not gonna give you the answer that you want. It depends
You don't
on
need
the
to.
person.
You can just sit there and be quiet while I explain it. That's fine too.
Okay, great.
So the thing is that here's your logical extension so that you understand it while you look away. But you're still going to hear me because you have to, right? You need to understand this. The logical extension of you saying it depends on the person. When I ask you, what do you think most people would do? You say, I don't know. That's what you're saying. I don't know. Which means the logical entailment of that is you don't know if most people would choose death or trauma. That's the extension.
Yeah, and it literally roots back to all of us saying both men and women.
I got to move it on, Andrew. I
Okay.
got